evening. Thank you for attending this session. My name is Patricia A. Servant. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I've been asked to be the moderator of this panel and this forum. We've scheduled 1 hour for this forum, and so one of the things that we did was to get questions in advance. Can you hear me? You can't hear me. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Yeah, better. So what we did was we got questions from students in advance so that we can actually address as many questions as possible within this hour. And so I thank those students, perhaps that are here, that have submitted these questions. And the panelists will answer the questions. I will try to moderate, make sure that we get through the questions in a timely way. If for some reason you have a question to ask, we ask you to write it on those pieces of paper that we have handed out, because we will not have time for questions during this particular session. And one of the things that I want to point out here are the number of email addresses of our panelists, as well as mine. If you have a question that you'd like to direct to one of them. Again, we'll be collecting, and I think, Jazz, I want to thank you so much for helping coordinate this. And so, again, if you have questions, please write them down on those pieces of paper, and we will definitely answer them and make sure that folks get an answer from us. Our goal tonight is to make sure, as much as possible, that you hear from the panelists, that the questions that were asked are answered, and that you leave more informed about where Northwestern stands on the issue of sexual assault and sexual harassment. I think that is probably the most important thing. Secondly, I think it's important that we continue these conversations. This is not going to be just one forum, but I hope that you leave with the idea of meeting up with other students, informing them of what you've heard. And again, if you have additional questions, please make sure that you refer them to one of us, and we'll definitely answer them. With that in mind, I'm going to have each of the members of the panel. These are members of the actual Title IX committee. Some have agreed to be here tonight, and I thank them as well. But I'm going to have Laura start. Each of them will introduce themselves and share with us where they work and what they do. And then I will then go and start with the questions that have been posed. So Laura, would you please?
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Stewart, and I am the coordinator of sexual health education and violence prevention at CARE, which is the Center for Awareness, Response, and Education. I can't even remember what my own acronym stands for. I am one of the folks who does both prevention efforts, so prevention programs around sexual violence, and also educational programs around healthy sexuality. And I'm also one of our confidential survivor advocates on campus, and I've been here since 2009.
My name is Tara Sullivan. I think I may win an award for longest title, but I am our Assistant Dean of Students, Director of Student Conduct and Conflict Resolution, and I also serve as the Deputy Title IX Coordinator for Student Concerns. Very long, complicated titles, I suppose. But basically that means that I work with any type of situation in which two students or multiple students are involved, not with faculty and staff, but where they're specifically students. I have only been here since the end of January, so I am learning a bit with all of you as well, and certainly have some new things to share.
My name is Todd Adams, and I am the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students. And in that role, I work closely with Tara in matters related to student life and student conduct. Also in my area is the University Career Services, services for students with disabilities, off-campus life, and an area that we'll probably touch on at some point during the session tonight, and that is Student Assistance and Support Services, otherwise known as SAS. And I've been here since last February, so about 13 to 14 months now.
Hello everyone, my name is Joan Slavin. First I want to say thank you to all of you for coming out here tonight on this cold night to learn more about Northwestern's policies and procedures involving Title IX matters. Sexual misconduct is something that all of us on this panel take very seriously, and we work with these issues every single day. I'm the director of the university's Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention, which is a role that I've held for about 5.5 years. Prior to coming to Northwestern, I used to practice employment law in Chicago. The Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention investigates and resolves complaints of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct around the university, except for complaints against students, which are handled by the Office of Student Conduct and Conflict Resolution. My office also conducts harassment prevention training around the university for faculty, staff, and students. In 2013, I was also named the university's Title IX coordinator, which involves overseeing Northwestern's compliance with Title IX, including coordinating the investigation of and response to sexual misconduct complaints, tracking incidents and monitoring trends in sexual misconduct on campus, developing and publicizing the university's policies and procedures related to sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, and overseeing training that the university provides in these areas. I also chair the Title IX Coordinating Committee, which consists of 13 staff members whose daily work involves Title IX and Title IX compliance. We meet monthly to improve our Title IX policies and procedures, and many of us are here tonight.
Good afternoon, I'm John Dunkel. I'm the Executive Director of the Counseling and Psychological Services, also known as CAPS. My role in the Title IX issues and my staff role is to provide emotional support and crisis intervention support when students would like to avail themselves of those resources. We have no reporting requirements. Matter of fact, under Illinois state law, we're not allowed to share anything unless there's a written consent from the student to do so. So we provide confidential support services to students in situations like this. This is my 19th year here at Northwestern.
My name is Renee Red. I'm director of the Women's Center. And at the Women's Center, we focus on 2 issues: advocacy around sexual violence and sexual harassment. Generally, we sort of watch individually and institutionally how individuals are being impacted, and institutionally if we can improve the policies and procedures that the university engages in as part of our sort of ongoing efforts. And we also provide counseling as well around sexual violence, relationship violence, physical violence, and intimate partner violence. And generally, we're able to offer that kind of counseling from a feminist-oriented model that looks at the sociocultural constraints in our environments that impact that as well.
Hi, I'm Sean Johnson. I'm the commander with Northwestern University Police Department. I'll be celebrating my 25th year here, April 10th. And I'm looking forward to the staff luncheon. On a day-to-day basis, I oversee institutional emergency management. I do a lot of work in the research sector with infrastructure protection. But as a member of the Title IX committee, what I do is I bring university police into this multidisciplinary collaborative process to ensure that we're appropriately partnered and appropriately prepared for dealing with these issues in our community. And I, in turn, represent many of my colleagues who are more directly involved on a regular basis with the other folks that have introduced themselves on training, outreach, and coordination efforts.
Okay, thank you. So again, for those of you that just came in a little bit later, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that I'll be reading the questions that were submitted by students, and the panelists will answer them. I will ask them to be as concise, but as clear and thorough as possible. Is that possible? To make sure that you leave again with a hope that you have a better understanding of the process, procedures, practices. So I'm going to go, and then if you do have another question, please, there are papers around there that you can actually submit, and we will later respond to them. So keep them in your hand, and we will definitely deal with them afterwards. Thank you. Okay, question number 1, and it reads, if a student reports an instance of sexual assault or harassment to the university, what is the process that is set in motion? Does it matter who the student reports this to? Does it matter who the alleged harasser is? Another student, faculty, staff? What sanctions are available for NU to give to the perpetrators of various misconducts? harassment, assault, domestic violence. So I believe Joe and Tara will be answering.
Sure. The office that will investigate and resolve a student's complaint of sexual assault or sexual harassment depends on whether the alleged harasser is a student or is a faculty or staff member or a third party. Regardless of whom the student goes to report the complaint to, it will get directed to the right office. So, at either office would be fine, and we'll make sure that the right office gets it. For a complaint against another student, including a grad student, the office that would handle the matter is the Office of Student Conduct and Conflict Resolution, which is Tara's office. For a complaint against a staff or faculty member or a third party or a contractor, the office that will handle that is the Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the process is when a complaint comes to the Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention. The first step is, when I receive a complaint, is that I would interview the complainant. And that's a pretty informal meeting in my office. It's just me listening to the complainant tell his or her story about what happened. I take notes. I don't record it on video or tape. I ask questions, and I ask him or her what he or she would like to see happen as a result of bringing the complaint, and we discuss the next steps in the process. I also ask the complainant if he or she has any documents that I should review, such as emails or screenshots, and for the names of any witnesses that there may or may not be. The next step then is that I interview any witnesses that were named by the complainant, or witnesses also that I think may have relevant information to the case. And then I also review any documents that the complainant or the witnesses provide me. Then the next step is that I interview the respondent, which is the person that's being accused of the inappropriate behavior. This is the respondent's opportunity to tell me his or her side of the story. There are always two sides of the story, often more than two sides of the story. So I will review any information that the respondent wishes to provide me, and I ask the respondent as well for any witnesses or people that he or she thinks I need to talk to complete my investigation. I then complete my investigation and look at all the materials, and then I come to findings of fact about what I think most likely occurred. Under Title IX, I need to determine whether the preponderance of the evidence suggests that the respondent has violated our sexual harassment policy or our new sexual misconduct policy. People often wonder what happens in a he said, she said situation, and whether we would still come to findings of fact, and the answer to that is yes, we will still come to findings of fact, and we consider the credibility of each person's testimony as well as any other evidence that we do have in making our determination. By the way, the preponderance of the evidence is our legal standard, and that is a 50.0001% standard, that it's 50.1% likely that the behavior occurred. So in cases then when we find a violation of the university policy, we provide the findings to the relevant dean's office in the case of a faculty respondent, or to human resources and the head of the unit in the case of a staff member respondent. Those offices that will determine what corrective actions, such as discipline, may be needed based on, they would consider the severity of the offense, any prior disciplinary matters, and sanctions assessed in comparable matters. And sanctions against staff or faculty can include such things as written warnings, mandatory training or counseling, suspension, demotion, and termination of employment, including for tenured faculty.
So when the respondent is a student, the process is similar but looks a little bit different. Students are often coming to our office without necessarily knowing where they want to go with a concern, right? They come to our office because they want to sort of explore their options. They want someone to know. They're not sure what they want to do. It's not always a completely clean process, and that they know exactly what they want the outcome to be. So much like Joan, the first thing we do is meet with the reporter or the person who's coming forward to let us know of a concern. And we sort of conduct an initial inquiry if we know who that person is. I think it's important for the folks to understand, for the Office of Student Conduct and as a Deputy Title IX Coordinator for Students, I'm often getting information from NUPD or from resident services or other staff on campus who may have had a conversation with the student, and the student may not even be interested in coming forward, right? So we conduct some initial inquiry to see what information we have about a situation. If we know who the victim or the survivor might be, we do reach out and give them the opportunity to come in and meet with us. If they're willing to or interested in doing that, that's their choice. And if they are willing or interested in coming in and meet with us, we have an initial conversation with them. And we sort of explore options. In some cases, they're really interested in utilizing the conduct process, and in other instances, they're not really interested, but they may be looking for other sort of accommodations or things to happen. We have a responsibility to remediate the impact and prevent the reoccurrence of these acts when they do occur. And so we may work with a student to do that without going through a full conduct process if that's not really what they're looking to do. So we may do things like a no contact between students. We may help them figure out different class sections that they might be better accommodated in, or that the respondent might be better accommodated in. We may think about housing situations and whether everybody feels safe and secure in their housing situation, and those types of things that we sort of work with students through. If they are interested in filing a complaint and going through the conduct system, our system looks a little bit different. That's sort of where things start to look a little bit different right now. We use a board system where students are able to present the information about their experiences to a board. The respondent is able to do the same. The board are trained members of faculty, staff, and students who have been trained both in terms of our general policies, but also in terms of sexual misconduct policies and how to respond to those on campus. So there's a board process that would both find sort of, Joan referenced the findings of fact. Our board creates the findings and also issues sanctions. Sanctions, similar to what Joan has indicated, could be disciplinary in nature, including suspension or exclusion from campus, and they could also be educational in nature. One of the new, I think, really exciting partnerships that we have is with the Center for Contextual Change that's helping us put together an educational program to help folks who, not necessarily folks who have violated a sexual assault policy, but maybe sexual harassment or stalking policy, who need some education around their behaviors, who show an interest in making changes in their lives. So we have the ability to do both educational, interventional, as well as disciplinary sanctions.
So I'm just, for a point of clarification, if a student were to go to Laura, what would happen? Can you just kind of give us a little walkthrough? Because I think one thing is that they know about these two offices, but let's just say that they go for support to your office.
So CARE is a pretty new office. It's about 2 years old. We opened in 2011. And we have 2 full-time staff, myself and Eva Ball, and we're both survivor advocates who are confidential under Illinois law. And that means we have protection that's similar to people in CAPS or counselors in the Women's Center. And and we serve students only, so we don't serve faculty and staff or part of student affairs. We work with undergraduate and graduate students. And one of the reasons that we created CARE was we did a needs assessment in 2010 with students and staff to ask, what could we be doing better in terms of response to sexual violence. And we heard from survivors who were very nervous about starting out going to student conduct or starting out going to the sexual harassment prevention office because I liked how this question was phrased, what is a process that is set in motion? Like if we report a complaint, what process is set in motion? And I think that language reflects how students often view the process, like it's like wheels that are turning and they're not necessarily in control of like how those wheels turn. So we worked with our Office of General Counsel to establish CARE so that it met the guidelines for a rape crisis center and a domestic violence center under Illinois law, so that staff in that office are confidential under Illinois law. And the purpose of doing that was so students could come talk to staff at CARE and learn more about these processes without setting any wheels in motion. Like they would know, make a very informed decision. Okay, I want to report here, or I want to get help here, or maybe I don't want to make a report, I just want to get counseling. And so that's kind of how we set up the office. And that would be similar if someone started going to CAPS or the Women's Center. All those offices are confidential. And we wanted to establish a space that would be survivor-centered so that we could worry just, what does a survivor need, what does a survivor want to do, without kind of the added, like both Tara and Joan have a lot of obligations under Title IX and other federal laws that they, have to follow certain reporting and investigation procedures. So we have both options. The university is required to report and investigate if it goes through an office like Joan's or like Tara's, but we also have confidential spaces where the survivor has kind of complete control over what they want to do next, and that would be CARE or CAPS or the Women's Center. And we all kind of work together to ensure that survivors are aware of their options and they can make decisions about what they want to do, if that makes sense.
Good. And about half of the students who are coming to the Office of Student Conduct are coming through CARE. So just as a...
Okay, I'm going to go to the next question, just to make sure that we try to cover as many as possible. What is the line that Northwestern draws between sexual assault and sexual harassment? How is it determined which has occurred, and how are the disciplinary actions different for assault versus harassment?
I wanted to start with a couple of definitions on that. Sexual assault is a crime, and it's defined by Illinois criminal laws as sexual penetration by force or threat of force or without consent. And Commander Johnson can provide more details about how police reports alleging sexual assault are handled by law enforcement and by NUPD. Sexual harassment is a more general term, and it can include any unwelcome conduct or comments of a sexual nature, including sexual innuendos, dirty jokes, obscene gestures, sexually explicit profanity, pressure for an intimate relationship, unwelcome touching, and all the way up to and including sexual assault. Under our new policy on sexual misconduct, stalking, and dating and domestic violence, definitions are provided for several categories of prohibited conduct, including sexual penetration without consent, sexual contact without consent, sexual exploitation, and sexual harassment. The disciplinary sanctions that are assessed for violations of the new policy or the old policy would be based on the severity of the offense, prior disciplinary matters involving that person, and sanctions assessed in comparable matters. The more severe the offense, the more severe the discipline would be. Sanctions can include, but aren't limited to, written warnings, mandatory training or counseling, suspension, demotion, expulsion, and termination of employment, including revocation of tenure.
Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, every criminal offense in Illinois or other states have elements that determine the offense. So each element is a characteristic that determines what type of offense occurred. Sex offenses are probably one of the most complex areas of Illinois law, and those elements vary depending on what happened, who the offender was, who the victim was in regards to age or other status. Essentially, there's two types of sexual criminal offenses in Illinois. Although there's more than that, but to break it down simply, there's criminal sexual assault, which involves penetration, no matter how slight, of one sex organ and the other sex organ, or other body parts. And then there's sexual abuse, which involves unwanted intentional contact, even through the clothing of one person to certain body parts of another person. On the harassment side, there's some distinctions I think that can be drawn too, because there are some harassment behaviors that can be criminal. Those would include behaviors associated with domestic violence, where there's some type of domestic relationship between the victim and the offender. Also, stalking cases, whether that's cyber stalking or general stalking. There are harassment-type activities that don't require physical violations of the victim in order to constitute a crime.
Thank you. Okay, the third question. If a victim of sexual harassment or assault has sustained academic deficiencies as a result of the sexual harassment or assault, what is Northwestern as a school willing to do to remedy the situation? Todd?
So, as Laura mentioned, we received quite a few referrals in the Dean of Students office, and they could come from CARE, they could come from CAPS, they could come through student conduct and conflict resolution or other places and spaces, and it would be at the request or the knowledge of the student involved. And when we are aware, we will work individually with students as it relates to not just academics, although specifically that if we're certainly in the middle of an academic term, to address or develop a plan. We are constantly in contact with the academic deans in the various schools. What we share is very, very limited. Obviously, we have to share a student's name, and we would share that they're working through something at this particular period of time, and we would ask for some accommodations. Generally, most schools are used to hearing from us around these things and are good about working with us. Depending on the time of the year, there are different options available. It could be that a student says, I'd be interested in a withdrawal, and we could think about withdrawing either a course or multiple courses. If it's all the way at the end of an academic term, sometimes incompletes are a better choice and what the student may want, and we can work towards that end. Certainly thinking about exams as well as papers and the other kinds of academic coursework that take place throughout a term are things that we can request extensions or look to those kinds of options. So it's really an individual thing depending on where the student is and what she or he is interested in, where they are in that academic term and what might be available. I did mention when I introduced myself that we have an area called Student Assistance and Support Services. And that area is new as of about a year ago now. And when I started about 13 months ago, there was one person doing this kind of outreach. We have since, at the time that I arrived, added a second, and this summer we'll add a third person. Now these are folks that don't just work with victims of assault or misconduct, but are helping students that might have a need to work through a situation. They're maybe in a crisis mode or in distress. So that's something that we have ramped up quite substantially really in the last 12 to 13, 14 months.
So you mentioned something about withdrawal. There's a question, the second question had to do with, do we force withdrawals?
Absolutely not. We do have a voluntary medical leave, which is really the only type of withdrawal other than an academic withdrawal, which a student could work with at their academic school to do if that was a choice they wanted to. But if we wanted to do a medical leave and the student was not only interested in that but qualified for that, coming through counseling or health services or both, where that recommendation is made, we absolutely will process a medical leave. And what that means is they're withdrawn from that academic term in full. It actually shows as if they weren't enrolled at all that term, and they receive full refund for the cost of that quarter or that academic term. And we do process
I want
those.
to make sure that we underscore the fact that no one is forced to leave. That is really important to note. And besides CARE, we have other support services. Can some of you address that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, CAPS provides emotional support to students who want to avail themselves of those resources. We have no reporting requirements, as I said. Going back to Todd's point about the forced withdrawals, again, there are no forced withdrawals. As a matter of fact, working with survivors of sexual assault and harassment is actually, that would be a horrible thing to do, because one of the things you want to do is give them as many options and give them as much autonomy as you can in these situations. So what we will do when students come to us and share they are a survivor of assault or harassment, we will talk through with them what some of their options might be and help them to sort of think through what they would like to do and support them through that. So, that's right.
I think one of the really wonderful benefits that the university offers is that we have a 52-section model at the Women's Center for survivors of sexual violence, relationship, physical violence. And
Then you can pick up a little bit?
Sure. Having such a benefit is really important, I think, too, and sends a message that the university is committed to providing those kinds of services. And I think we've seen students take advantage of that over the years and feel really empowered to continue to stay at Northwestern. We know that approximately 12% of survivors report the sexual violence. Not everyone who experiences this reports or comes forward to seeking some kind of help. So many of you know more about these individuals than we do. And I'm sure some of you as students, you hear things, they talk to you, they want help. And you might encourage them to go forward and get assistance, but they don't necessarily come forward. So I feel privileged to work at an institution where the commitment is there to providing the resources. We're not always able to, you all know about waiting lists. We work as hard as we can to sort of get people in as quickly as we can.
And I think it's important to understand too, that university police, if we're the ones to receive a report from a victim, that we're really there to provide care and support to that victim using all of these resources. So, and to empower the victim to make choices, to inform them of the other alternatives that they have other than the traditional criminal justice system to deal with the matter, whether it's through the Title IX office or through the SEAS office. And that's important why we're a part of not only the Title IX committee, but a number of other partnership initiatives, including the Campus Coalition on Sexual Violence, where we partner and try to integrate these services so that, again, when someone shows up to the police, it's not what some may perceive as a traditional law enforcement process. We're really there to bring to bear the resources that are available to support and care for that person and empower that person to make their own decisions on how they want to move forward.
So as many of you know, hopefully, we have changed or updated our sexual assault, sexual misconduct policy. And the question is that if someone comes forward with a complaint regarding an incident that occurred prior to the policy, the establishment of this policy, would the new policy take place, or would we have to refer back to the old policy?
Well, this is a really, really good question. Both our old policies and our new policy prohibit all types of sexual harassment, including sexual assault. So the same types of behavior are prohibited under both. The new policy provides much greater detail about sexual misconduct and a comprehensive definition of consent. But the same behaviors that were prohibited before are prohibited now. If there was to be conduct that is now prohibited by the new policy and it wasn't prohibited at the time of the behavior, I believe we would apply the policy that was in effect at the time of the behavior.
Okay. So the next one is about statute of limitations. Is there one? Here at Northwestern.
On a criminal perspective, yes, there is a statute of limitations for criminal offenses in Illinois. The simple answer is for felony offenses, it's 3 years. Within 3 years, action has to be taken by the state against the defendant in order to carry out state action. In misdemeanor cases, action has to be taken by the state against the defendant within 18 months. There are some exceptions, however, where cases involving DNA, where DNA was collected during an investigation and submitted to a DNA database, and the victim reported the offense to the police within 3 years, then there is no statute of limitations. So
criminally there is.
Criminally there is.
Okay. How about in terms of our policies here at the university?
In terms of matters brought against faculty or staff, so brought into the Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention, there is no statute of limitations. I have investigated complaints brought to my attention years after the alleged offenses occurred. I would encourage people, however, to bring forth their complaints as soon as possible, both so that we can address the offensive behavior and to prevent future problems, and also to facilitate our ability to conduct the investigation, because it gets harder as more time goes by and perhaps witnesses have left the university or graduated or are no longer working here.
How about students too?
And when the respondent is a student, this is one of the things you'll hear a little bit later, that we're in the process of sort of revising and changing our conduct process. And this is one of the things that we are considering and looking to determine what the appropriate length of time is. Right now, the policy says a year, that students have a year to bring forward a complaint against another student. That assuming that the respondent has not graduated. So if the respondent has graduated, we're more limited in what we can do. One of the things that we're looking at is sort of taking out the year and just having a graduation timeline. There's a variety of different sort of ways in which we can do that to sort of look at that. But right now it says it's a year.
And as we develop the new policies, we will be including student input, correct?
Yeah, we have already been including student input. We've had a number of different student group meetings and a number of different opportunities for students, some of whom are in the room, to give feedback on the new procedures that we'll be implementing here. As we draft them, we'll be sending them out to students to get reactions to, and then we'll also be presenting them once they're finalized.
So the next question is if, as a TA, if I have a student come to me with concerns about sexual harassment or assault, where should I direct them and what further action, if any, should I take? That's the first part of the question. Secondly, what are the policies concerning the confidentiality of this information? And then third, are the policies different for professors, advisors, administrators, etc.? So if I'm a TA and a student comes to me, where do I direct them? I think we've kind of answered that, but I think it's worth repeating.
Okay, well, if the complaint is against a faculty or staff member or a third party, please direct them to the Office of Sexual Harassment Prevention, and please also, the TA should give me a call too, just to make sure that we're closing that loop. This question has brought to light an ambiguity in the wording in our new policy, and we're going to work to clarify that. The policy, as it is now written, provides that all employees are mandatory reporters of sexual misconduct of which they become aware. Graduate students are not employees, but our intent is that anyone who has teaching authority or supervising authority is a mandated reporter, as it was under our old policy. So this means that if you as a TA learn about some possible sexual misconduct that may have occurred, or a student tells you about this, you're obligated to report it to a Title IX coordinator or a deputy Title IX coordinator, which is the same responsibility and duty that all faculty and staff, including professors, advisors, and administrators, have that same duty as well. There's something regarding confidentiality too.
Right. Basically, what are the policies concerning confidentiality of this information?
Well,
So if the TA gets this information, should they share it beyond referring them to you or to Tara?
Good point. We try and keep every matter involving sexual harassment or sexual misconduct as confidential as we possibly can. We handle our investigations really very discreetly, only talking to people on a need-to-know basis. And we ask every witness or participant involved in the process to please keep it confidential as well.
Okay, so the next one, does the university report every sexual violence matter to police? Why and why not?
So we touched on this a little bit. We have tried to create some spaces within the university where staff are not mandated to report. And we tried to make it really clear, like if you go to CARE, CAPS, or the Women's Center, there isn't a mandated report that's made to police or to a Title IX coordinator. That information is confidential to the survivor advocates at CARE or the counselors at CAPS or the Women's Center. But if other university officials become aware, just like Joan was saying, of some kind of sexual misconduct, then they do have a responsibility to report, and I can let them talk about that. But we did try to really intentionally create some spaces where survivors could come and hear more about options and get assistance without generating a report unless they wanted that to happen. So we will make a report, or we'll help survivors make a report if they want to do that. But if you go to CARE Capture the Women's Center, it's not automatically done, only if the survivor wants it. Do other people want to talk about non-confidential?
Yeah, I think one, the Clery Act, which requires reporting on a number of aspects of campus safety, including crimes. There is a duty for campus security authorities to report depersonalized information, so it does maintain the integrity of the victim's identity to university police. However, as Laura mentioned, there are offices within the university where there's a confidentiality privilege, and they would not even report depersonalized information under Clery to the university police without the victim's consent.
I think it's important to understand sort of what is reported. So depersonalized still sounds like there may be a tremendous amount of detail, or you may be perceiving that someone could still sort of figure out what happened or who it happened to, and that's really not the case. Clery requires that we report a certain set of information, so not all cases are reportable under Clery, but a certain set of cases are reportable under Clery. And then Clery is really intended to protect our campus, right? So it was designed to be able to give students a really good understanding of what's going on campus so that they can make smart choices about where they are and what they're doing in their campus environment. So Clery is intended to protect the campus community. At the same time, we certainly understand that it can be sort of concerning for a survivor to think that their information is going to be put out there, even in terms of Clery. So what I can tell you is, for example, we might report to Clery something along the lines of a female student reported unwanted touching by a male student in a South Campus residence. Right, so not enough information that anyone would be able to trace anything that's occurred to any one individual person or whom it was associated with or where it was associated with in any regard, but enough information that the campus community would be aware of the general sort of activities and goings on campus.
I would just add that one of the reasons this is important is something that Renee offered, in that we know this is one of the most underreported crimes and occurrences on college campuses. Many of you might be aware that the president has issued a task force to continue to look at this issue. There have been a lot of changes from a compliance and regulatory aspect. So it is good for us to report this so that the data is there, because up to a certain point we really didn't have data, and the data we had was so low, so underreported, that it didn't mean much. So it is still in that capacity, but this gives us perhaps clearer or slightly more informed picture.
Another option that people have, sometimes people are uncomfortable going forward with the counseling option. Chaplain services as well have confidentiality.
Thank you. It's very important.
So just to make sure we understand, so Clery Acts, when we report the numbers, it doesn't include the counseling, care, or the women's centers numbers, right?
Correct.
So that might be, there was a question that was asked of me, and I just want to make sure that that was clear.
Unless
So-
they're referred.
Right, unless they're referred, right, correct. But I think that's hopefully that's clear, because folks think that there might be more going on, but somehow our report doesn't reflect it, and it's because some of the students probably go to some of the services that are confidential, therefore they do not get reported.
Yeah, Clery does recognize some confidential privilege relationships that
Right.
do not mandate
Okay,
reporting.
just want to make sure we got that clarified.
And we do also, just as an FYI, we report every year how many students we see at CARE. So if someone wanted to know like total number of students who came to get advocacy services at CARE, we report just the number. So, how many students are we seeing? So that's available on our website, on the Campus Coalition on Sexual Violence Reports page. You can see a report from each year, and that's included.
so the next question is, what are some of the things Northwestern has done to improve processes, policies, services, and information dealing with sexual misconduct? Now, we probably have heard some of that already, but is there something else that we could add so that our students can be even more informed?
Well, I think from the police side, we partner with folks here on a Violence Against Women Act grant that provided a lot of resources and benefits to the community. But from the police side, it provided us in 2011, 2012, I believe, about 40 hours of training to all of our staff, whether it's the community service officers in the residence halls or the sworn police staff. And it covered areas on sexual assault response and investigation, domestic violence response and investigation, and other relation-based violence training, stalking response by the National Stalking Resource Center, as well as a variety of community resource providers that provide advocacy and support services to make sure that all of our folks are informed in providing that support I talked about if a victim were to come into University Police to report. Because, again, our primary objective is to make sure that person is cared for and safe.
So Sean, all the officers were trained?
Yes, and in addition to that, we have officers who specialize in certain areas. So our detectives have specialized training in a variety of investigative techniques, including those that are focused in sexual assault investigations and domestic violence. And then we have first-line officers that have been trained as sexual assault investigators to provide them, just that added layer of education and awareness to be able to be a better resource to the community.
Right. Other things that we may not have touched on in terms of the changes that we're making?
The Title IX Coordinating Committee, you see seven, I think it's 7 of us here, and there are 13 of us that I think Joan mentioned meet monthly, if not even more frequently, has been meeting for approximately a year. So pulling together all the different aspects that are represented here, plus some that are not, the areas of campus that are not only principally concerned with this issue, but represent other areas that aren't here, where we're talking about this. We're working very collaboratively, supporting not only grants and other activity on campus, but talking about how do we best serve the student population as well as faculty and staff. And I think having a uniform policy on sexual misconduct, stalking, dating, and domestic violence is a huge first step. We're one of the very few campuses in the country that have a uniform policy. So it doesn't matter if you're the TA or the faculty, your staff, your student, what your classification is. This is the policy that we all have, and the definition of consent being so clearly outlined in it. Again, something that you don't see in a lot of policies. So I think we're very proud of the work that we've done in really less than a year to not just pull this group together, but to make some strides.
I think it certainly shows our commitment to the issue because we do take it very, very seriously. And we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to invite the president, Morty Shapiro, to say a few things about the policies and where we're going and what we're hoping that we will get to at some point. He canceled an appointment so he could be with us, and so Morty, thank you for that. If you don't mind saying a few things, and then I'll close it up.
Sure. Yeah, why not? I was very impressed by the 7 of you in terms of your experience and your sincerity, but we all have the job to keep our students safe and take it seriously. And I think we probably all agree we could do an even better job with that. It's a little frustrating not to be able to talk about the current case. We were all very careful, and I have to be careful too when pursuing justice. Anything to talk about it probably undermines our ability to do the right thing there. So I'm going to resist that temptation. But I think if maybe I could speak, Patricia, for a minute about the general issue of keeping our students safe, particularly in a sexual context. As president of Northwestern, I feel like I have a lot of jobs, but I've certainly spent a lot of time traveling around the world. I just got back from 11 days. So you were there, some of them with me, Patricia, in Israel, I think in England. detail. So, you know, carrying the flag's an important part of being president, keeping our research labs going, $549 million a year, mainly from the federal government support, building the right buildings, et cetera, raising money so that we could remain affordable to students regardless of family income. But there's no question in my mind about the number one job I have is to keep our students safe. And there's no question in my mind that we will spend anything to do it. There's nothing, everything else pales by comparison. You know, it's the question, it's not always easy to figure out how to do it. And sometimes we fail miserably at it. It's, you know, let me just tell you another 30 seconds or a minute about why. You know, I welcome the students during move-in day, you know, and I meet with the parents after I give my talk, and I stand in line for 3 hours, and mothers and fathers come up to meet with me. And over and over again, they say, keep my child safe. And I say I'm going to do it. So that sort of haunts me all the time, because I give my word that thousands of people can trust us with their most precious memories and members of their family, their children. So I feel personally responsible whenever anything goes wrong. And I think I'm probably the only one who gives his or her word to, you know, to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of parents. That's one thing. The second thing is, in general, when it's a question of faculty and faculty exploiting their position, I'm not talking at all about this specific case, but in general. You know, I've been a faculty member for 35 years. It's a sacred trust to be with a student, and you know, it puts in question everything you do with a student. It really does. And all of a sudden, for the first time, you think, do I close your office when you're meeting with a young woman, a young man? And, you know, it so contaminates the faculty-student relationship that whenever there's an abuse of that privilege to teach here or elsewhere, it costs us all. I just can't tell you how upset throughout my 35 years teaching when anybody misuses his or her power to exploit their relationship. But probably the most personal is, I mean, it wasn't until I became a father of 2 daughters that I learned what it's like to live in fear that one of them is going to be, God forbid, sexually exploited or sexually harassed or sexually assaulted. That becomes very personal. One of my daughters is about to enroll in September.
Right.
And, you know, it's when you're a parent, when you think about your daughters and you think about people who might have power over them and use that power in the most disgusting way, it reminds you of what your job really is. So I don't know if that's what you wanted me to say.
Nope, I appreciate you being here, and
I'm learning.
You canceled your appointment, and that's why I wanted to give you a chance to just say a few words. So this closes the forum. I just want to remind you all that if you have questions, I will collect them, and we need to put them probably on a website so that we can answer them.
Chaz and I,
We'll find a way to.
we're working on
But I
that.
want to make sure people have a way to know where to find the answers to those questions.
If you guys keep an eye on the events page, we'll make sure as soon as we figure it out that we'll put it on the events page and the Title IX page. We'll put it everywhere. You guys
Yeah,
will.
that's good. So we're going to collect your questions, because I know that some of, you know, as we answered the questions that were submitted, I think they were very thoughtfully worded. Maybe some other questions have come up. The other thing is I want you to know that I know sometimes this topic and these issues can stir folks up. So there are some individuals that are here in the room that if you need to just chat for a second about what you're going through as you hear some of these issues, please feel free to utilize their support. I thank you so much for being here, and stay tuned. We'll make sure that these follow-up questions will get answered, and we'll continue to teach each other and learn more about it. So thank you so much.